Through the ups and downs, we stand tall in this journey of growth. Day by day, through the ups and downs, we stand tall in
Hello.
this journey of
Good
growth.
morning.
Day by
Good
day.
morning. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad.
I didn't comment on your fine leopard gear.
Oh yes, nice and warm. It's actually not. Doesn't feel that cold. I'm feeling quite warm this morning.
Summer's coming.
It is almost here.
We should say we're recording in February
Yes. Oh yes, that's a good
because this
point,
will
isn't it?
quite possibly be out in the spring
Yes.
with the
Yes,
flowers.
it shall. Well, I mean, violas have come out, so they're still
Oh,
out. I don't know. I'm not.
lovely.
They regenerated. So what are we talking about today, then, Jules?
Well, I'll let you take the lead.
Yeah, so today I think we're gonna do a little Q&A with Juliet about what it's like to be Jewish. Would you say that's it? What it's like to be Jewish? Is that the right way to say, or
I have no idea.
is that
I
how you would describe? So one of the things that I did want to sort of ask to begin with. So if we're going to be
mm,
asking about your beliefs about the religious side about being Jewish, is what does it actually mean to you
mm.
being Jewish? So
Well, I
is
think
it because from go on?
no. Go ahead. Carry on. Finish
No,
what you're
like
saying.
like culturally or religious and that kind of aspect. How do you see? How would you describe yourself?
Shall I give a bit of context?
Yes.
My my mum is Jewish by birth, so was born to two Jewish parents. Um, they were practicing Jews at a Reform synagogue. Um, However, and whilst she was brought up Jewish, um, I don't know how. I mean, she went to Hebrew classes, and my
I was going to say,
uncle.
what does practicing Jewish actually mean?
Yeah, they followed the religion, but I would say
Right.
it probably wasn't quite as intensely as my grandparents followed it in their old from when I can remember. And I
Yeah.
don't know that for sure, but I would imagine that's simply because their social life revolved around the synagogue. So
Right.
they went every. I don't believe my mum went every week to synagogue, though. But I might be wrong. I do know she went to
Mm.
Hebrew classes to learn Hebrew when she was younger. Um, but I they my mum and dad. My dad is Christian. Again,
Right.
not practicing. I never. I went to synagogue more than I went to church. With my family, I went occasionally with my grandparents. But I did join the Brownies, and there was a lot of churchy stuff at the Brownies. And I
Yeah,
also
that was
went
quite
to
religious, wasn't it?
yeah, I also went to a C of E school. So um, there was a bit of church stuff at school. But I was brought up in a very white British Christian area.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, and so, well, not and so, but we very much followed the Christian celebrations, Easter, Christmas, and the only Jewish um, Jewish kind of followings came from my grandparents. By
Mm.
so I think as a child I used to say I'm half Jewish, half Christian. I mean I was neither because I wasn't practicing either. But um, the truth is Judaism. I don't know about all religions. Judaism is passed down through the mother. I don't
Yeah, see,
know
this is
if
the thing.
that's
I
the
don't know
case.
anything about this kind of.
Yeah, I don't know if that is the case for all religions. It may well be.
Mm.
Um, but if you were to, I guess from that perspective, that would make me a Jewish person. Now I don't practice anything, but I view it very much as a cultural thing, and
Yeah, see, that's the thing.
traditions.
Rather than it being you have to religiously practice, You see
Yeah.
it more as, is it an identity as such?
I think so. Although I don't have to take that identity on, I don't suppose.
Mm.
But I guess it's more in my blood. For example, when I did my ancestry genetic
Yeah.
testing, it's 49% Ashkenazi Jew. So I'm,
What's an
it's
Ashkenazi Jew compared to a different Jew?
well,
Of
they're
one, of
the
one I wouldn't know.
you're asking me a question now that I'm not 100% sure on the answer.
No,
They're the Jews.
it's complete ignorance. I just, yeah, I've got no.
They're the Jews that originate from Eastern Europe. Um, I'm going to give you the exact countries, but Russia and Central and Eastern Europe.
Mm.
It comes from the Hebrew word Germany, as many of these Jewish communities historically lived in German-speaking regions before spreading to Poland, Russia, Lithuania, and other parts of Eastern Europe. So, my family came from Russia, or Belarus, I think.
Okay.
My nan, I've got a piece of writing from my nan, and I believe she says, does she call it Belarusia? She called it in her writing, Belarusia near Minsk. So
Cold. Sounds cold.
yeah, it does sound old. So that's where they originated from. And so when you're asking about what does being Jewish mean, my
Yeah.
genetics are 50% Ashkenazi Jew, whereas you don't get
Yeah.
that as I don't know about other religions, but I don't think I've never heard anyone else say that their DNA says that they're 50% Christian.
No, this is what confuses me about it, because I was brought up, say, at a school that was Christian, say, and
Mm.
I think my grandmother was a born again Christian, and there was some Catholic in there historically, but it wasn't like it. We were brought up like that, if you know what I mean. And I wouldn't be like, oh, Christian. That wouldn't be something that I'm a half Christian, because my mum was, because it was something that you decided whether or not you wanted to take on, not that was ingrained in you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's the same. There's obviously religious parts of it that are the same, but I
Mm.
think there's a cultural aspect to it
Yeah.
as well. Um, but to me, I suppose it's a feeling of if we were to have the oppression here of Jews like in Nazi Germany,
Yeah.
regardless of whether I'm um, celebrating Hanukkah or Christmas, I would be considered a Jewish person.
You can just go, no, I don't believe that anymore.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's less of a. I
No, not
think this is.
anymore.
I'm talking about from my experience rather than
Yeah. Yeah.
there'll be a lot of practicing Jews um, who believe in the teachings and
Mm.
who for them it's very much a religion and a practice, which it isn't for me. But exactly that. Um, if we were to be segregated, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter that I'm not going to the synagogue or not
Yeah.
following the teachings and saying the prayers. It's about my genetics.
Yeah. You'd have a yellow star then, wouldn't you?
Mm, yeah.
Well, that's literally as far as my education on that goes, from that aspect. So, and then, so what was it? What was it like for you growing up then? Do you feel like accepted when you were younger? Was
So when I
there? Yeah.
carry on, I don't
No,
want to
no, no. I
interrupt.
just, I just mean, was there? Did you, as much as you know that obviously it's you're in the religion or not, and then part this, part that. Did you feel accepted in that way when you were growing up? Because it must have been a
Um,
different experience for you.
yeah, I went to a C of E school, as I said, um, and I don't know really. I suppose when I first learned that my mum was Jewish, and therefore that made me Jewish. And
Mm.
I don't remember ever not knowing that. I don't remember the first time I felt different, but when I was at school, there was a kind of overwhelming feeling of, I'm talking primary school, of being found out.
Oh.
So people knew. I don't really remember telling people. Um, I must have done, obviously, and I don't remember how I told them or why I told them, but I suppose what happens is you start to learn about these things. You start to learn about um, Nazi Germany, for example, um, and realise that there's been some kind of hatred maybe towards that culture or that religion, and then you realise that there's a difference. And so I
Mm.
always felt, even though I remember only one other person who I recognised as being different in the same sense, and she was a Jehovah Witness, and she had to sit out of our assemblies and things, sit out quite a
Oh yeah,
lot.
we
She
had
was
we had one
practicing,
person like that. Yeah.
and I think I was always forever grateful that she was in a worse situation, I suppose, than me, in the sense that she was actually sitting out. I was still participating in everything. I was, from everyone else's perspectives, I guess they wouldn't have even. I wouldn't have even entered their heads. You know what it's like sometimes being
Mm.
a human being. You think that everyone can see you and everyone's staring at you, but the reality is you haven't even. That everyone's more worried about themselves than they are anyone else.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't really know whether everyone else was worrying in the same way about being different for some reason, whether it's the colour of their hair or the shoes they're wearing or the
Mm.
whatever it is. Um, but there was a feeling of it was that being found out. It was someone suddenly realizing that you are the same, or I am the same as um, what has been hated in the past, and suddenly everyone turning on me. So I guess that's what the underlying fear was, everyone suddenly turning on me for the same reason. So therefore, I tried to keep it undercover. And even though
Mm.
people did know, I think even the whole class knew. Um,
Where do you think that belief came from then? That you know that do you think that was because that wasn't necessarily true, was it? I don't remember thinking. If anything, the things that we learnt was that it was terrible what had happened, and um, I don't think that it was in our like in my head as a child. It was like it was terrible. That shouldn't have happened, sort of thing. So to be Jewish, you'd have been like, oh my God, like in my child head, you'd have been like, oh, it must have been terrible for you. You wouldn't have been like, you know, that's you're pointing fingers type thing.
I think because
There
that's
was
not
no
how you learn
hatred
it.
from
And
from
to
my
be honest,
perspective
I
as a
don't,
child.
I don't
So
really. Yeah, I think it's because it's not how you learn it. I don't honestly. I'm not sure that they even teach about the Holocaust at primary school. But um, I
today,
guess
oh
I
yeah, I can't
don't
remember when
know.
maybe it was because it was in. Um, we learnt about it as kids because of our grandparents fighting
Yeah, I have.
for to that would probably have been why I would have learnt about it so early and had such an awareness of it because we were taught about it at home.
I can't remember fully, and I'm linking it to that.
Mm.
But what it could also
Yeah.
be, it could also have been that being a Christian school,
Mm.
um, there were teachings. So every now and then the vicar would come in, for example, and maybe it was that it was knowing that um, they were saying that as if it were the right way. And I think religion can cause that, can't it? Because
Mm.
the vicar preaches. I mean, I'm using that word. It's quite a strong word because I think vicars generally do try to not be quite as preachy as a preacher, but
Mm.
they state the Bible as fact. And so even though there are alignments with um, Christian beliefs and Jewish beliefs, there was kind of this feeling of, well, that's not what I'm supposed to believe. And so if you find out that I'm not that, then there was still a kind of being found out.
Yeah.
But I don't know where it came from, really. But with regards to the, because I'm still talking about primary school, and senior school was a slightly different feeling. But the primary school stuff, we're taught about Nazi Germany, but we're taught about it but I think in a non-emotive way. So we're taught the facts, aren't we, rather than the emotions. So there might have been some kind of side notes of this was a terrible thing, but essentially it's just the facts. It's just this is what he believed and this is what happened.
Yeah, see, I had very much a military viewpoint on it, I think, because of my family. So I think it was the viewpoint that I got was the liberation and things like that, and what they did to the Germans, rather than I suppose, from your point of view, because you had the understanding of what it was like for a Jewish person, I suppose, whereas growing up, it was from a defending Great Britain, and the atrocities and what my grandparents saw. So I
Yeah.
suppose there was a different view on it, and it was it was never. There was a lot. I think I learned a lot more from my family than perhaps school then.
Yeah, I
But
think the overwhelming
not. But
feeling
yeah.
was being found out.
Mm,
And then at senior school, it moved into people would become more racist, I guess is the right word.
mm.
And, you know, I, my brother's friends would make kind of banter about him. They'd sing Aga do, but Aga Ju, and things like that. And so it was that kind of like, you know,
Yeah, see, it's nowadays when you think about the banter, isn't it? Was it banter or was it
yeah,
bullying?
yeah. And I
Or
remember,
how did your brother think about it then, or do you not really know? Have you asked him?
well, he's married a Jewish woman, and we could
Can't be that
psychoanalyze
bad.
that. Um, I don't really want to speak for him, to be honest.
No.
But also I remember a time when someone in my class at senior school said said to one of my friends that somehow it came out that my mum was Jewish, and someone said to my oh, I don't know whether I should say this on here, but it was about the Jewish nose, and so it was just there was just kind of like,
An underlying, but was it the fact that you were Jewish, or was it the fact that it was something different in
well,
a,
exactly,
because
yeah.
yeah,
So my overwhelming feeling was being found out based
yeah,
on the kind of banter, bullying,
yeah.
abuse I would
And then being
receive.
found out of going from a generational trauma aspect would have been
Yeah,
definitely ingrained into you, wouldn't it, from that aspect,
yeah.
the
But
being found out thing.
I suspect there's a lot of teenagers who have the same feeling. I don't know. I mean, it would be a great research study, and perhaps this has already
Mm.
been done as well anyway. But to take a handful of people and ask them whether they had this feeling of a fear of being found out about something. And it's not because everyone knows, so it's not necessarily being found out because everyone knew already. But
You don't
I
want
guess
people
that
to say
thing
it out
being,
loud.
yeah, that thing being, people being reminded, like, I don't imagine people spent their day walking around thinking, oh, Juliet's Jewish, Juliet's Jewish, Juliet's Jewish. But
In your
as
head,
soon
it
as
was
there was a
something that was
mention
quite,
of, yeah, it's like, let's just not mention Judaism
yeah,
or religion or anything like that ever, so because it will remind people.
yeah,
But maybe it's the same. I think what I just said, like people with ginger hair, for example. Maybe it's the same. Maybe they're just like, let's not mention kind of that biology of how you get your color eye. I can imagine people feeling like that. I remember doing that at school, like how you end up with different color eyes and
mm,
different hair color, and I can imagine. I can only imagine, as I said, people who have got like ginger hair feeling the same. Like, let's not mention how you get your hair color because then suddenly everyone's going to
yeah.
be talking about that. It's that kind of thing where it's very comfortable at
From
school, isn't it,
Jewish
to
to
be the person who's
ginger.
the same as everyone else. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's much easier to just be the same as everyone because there's nothing.
yeah,
That's how we end up conforming, I suppose.
yeah. And do you think that, like, going sort of on the question, do you think that it was widely understood in your school what it meant for you, or just wasn't mentioned then?
It wasn't mentioned, and I don't think it was widely understood, and I don't even widely understand
Mm.
Judaism. I understand what it feels like to be genetically Jewish, and I
Yeah.
understand what it feels like to have grandparents who were practicing,
Mm.
um, uh,
And when you
to
say
lightly
practicing, so
practicing.
what they were going to the synagogue, and what sort of practices in everyday life? Because like I was saying to you, and it's one of the things that I said, where I live now, there's a lot of Orthodox Jews, and they have, like I was saying about the wires and things, and they can't operate machinery. Really basic understanding here because we've got loads of wires everywhere,
Yeah,
in near where I live. But that's not the same kind of Judaism that you would practice. And is that even the right word? I don't know.
yeah,
That's the Orthodox, and then they're not the same
yeah.
because
No,
I don't understand it.
they're different. My kind of understanding of that is, and I I'm just talking from my own experience.
But that
So
wouldn't be what your
I
grandparents
really
did. I mean,
no,
that's not like a really practicing. That's a different type of.
yeah, I'm really not particularly knowledgeable on all of this. But I guess you can just liken it to the difference between Catholics and Christians and
Mm.
Baptists, for example.
I suppose
Um,
because it's got the name Jew in it, I think it's the same thing.
well,
But that is more where they were born as such, or where they derive from, and then what they believe in is different to what you'd believe in.
I think that it's I don't know. Yeah, I'm not gonna try and answer a question
You
I
would nod
don't
at each other over the
know
road,
the
like when
answer
you.
to. Um, Definitely different ways of practicing,
Yeah,
but I'm gonna hazard a guess that it's the same. It's the same kind of scriptures, and um, much like Christians and Catholics and
yeah.
Baptists all believe in the Bible.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I did read about this yesterday, but I on my notes, I can't find the answers, so we'll just leave it at that. Um, but your question was about my grandparents. So
Yeah.
they went to synagogue every week. They were heavily involved in the synagogue. My granddad was head of security. Um,
Oh, what does that mean?
well, synagogues, I believe probably all synagogues have security, for obvious reasons. Um, and so he'd it's quite funny because he had two prosthetic legs. So
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how well he would um, secure the synagogue in a moment of crisis. Um, but and I mean, I shouldn't tar his name, but I do remember him saying once that it was a good excuse to not have to sit in the synagogue. He had to sit outside with his pals on security. Um, so he was head of security at the synagogue, um, and my nan was in the synagogue choir, and she was very involved in that. She loved it, but also I think they went to a club, which was where they called it the club, I think, where they did all of their kind of social things when they retired. And mm, I've got a feeling that might have even been at the synagogue. I did go with my nan a few times. I went to a yoga
Mm.
class with her, and I went with my nan to a wedding at the synagogue, and we used to go and watch her every year in her choir concert. And a few times I'd go to synagogue with her. Um, but they
And what
went.
did you do when you were in the synagogue with your nan? What did you actually do? Did you is it like, because obviously I brought up a Christian, we would go to church. So
Yeah,
is the synagogue the same kind of? Do you go in there and you listen to, you say scriptures? We'd listen to the priest preaching the Bible as such, and you'd have certain holidays and things like Christingle. I remember because she had an orange and a candle. But
yeah.
like, did you do things like that? Did you have symbols and things like that that you'd go and from and do with your nan and things like that? Was it very much the community side?
Yeah, exactly that. In the synagogue, yeah, it it wasn't like being in church, because you're not in church. It's different, and they have the
Mm,
different dress and different kind of. They've got the big Torah on the. Well, here you go. I can't
I've
even
never
tell you
been
the
in a
name of it.
synagogue.
This
Mm.
is the thing as well. You can't really get in it. So I could just go. I've got a church down the road, and I could just go and walk in there for a Sunday
Yeah,
service.
yeah,
I don't think you can really do that at synagogue. And I contacted my local synagogue, which is not local. It's still like 40 minutes drive away, because there aren't synagogues everywhere, which is slightly
yeah.
frustrating. And they wanted a lot of info. Firstly, you have to become a member, so you have to pay. Um, but also you have to, they wanted from me the names of my grandparents. Um, they it was quite.
They do a background check on you then before you sort of like, in all.
Yeah, I don't think that's a requirement, but I think they wanted it for security purposes. Yeah.
Is it much of a fact that they're still quite closed doors because of things that have gone on in the past?
Yeah.
And things that are happening now perhaps as well.
Yeah.
So, if it was to be brought to modern day times, yeah, would it still be considered, would you consider yourself to be under threat now as such?
Um,
Do you feel in certain areas, do you have to defend yourself in certain
no, I don't.
circumstances?
No,
No.
not at all. Not in the slightest. And now I don't feel afraid of getting found out, because
Mm,
I think the people that or adults, I think, have enough of an awareness to not do the kind of banter thing.
mm,
Um, and instead, as you know, I did suffer some um, anti-Semitism uh, on a what? Well, I didn't. I am in a Telegram group, and
mm.
some people had posted some anti-Semitic comments, and I pulled them up on it rather than hide. My reaction as a
Yeah,
child would have been to hide and just hope no one finds out that I'm Jewish, almost like the bully's friends who will go along with the bully knowing it's wrong, just
yeah,
for fear of through fear of
yeah.
being kind of targeted themselves. Um, Whereas I called these people out on it. I don't feel threatened in the slightest now, um, and I don't feel
And do you
ashamed.
think that
Maybe ashamed is the right
but
word.
do you think that people do that through a lack of understanding, that they probably need a bit more education? What did you do in that circumstance?
Well, no, actually, these people are people who um, believe in some. Well, I think believe in some conspiracy theories, which I don't really understand or know about. But there are some conspiracies about Jews kind of ruling the world. Um, you probably know about these better than me. Some of these
Hollywood,
theories.
the Hollywood mafia of there's a lot of Jewish, powerful Jewish people in Hollywood, isn't there?
Okay, so there's there's all of the, and the irony is, I didn't. Freemasons are lumped in to this
Oh,
with Jews as
I
well.
didn't know they were. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did know it because of the circles I hang out in. You know, when I've seen these kind of messages, it's the Masons and the Jews, these conspiracy theories. Um,
Right.
Interestingly, the Freemasons were also put into the concentration. They were part of the part of a group of people who were oppressed by in Nazi Germany as well.
Did not know that.
Yeah, so it's quite, some of these conspiracy theories are very much down the kind of Nazi Germany beliefs,
Yeah,
just disguised really. And Matt's dad and granddad were quite involved in the Masons, and I believe quite high up in that establishment. And so Matt and I should be great candidates for ruling the world, really.
yeah.
And we very much don't. And
I'd
these
follow you.
conspiracy theories are true. Something I should also say, though, I don't feel threatened. You said about, do I feel threatened? I
Yeah,
don't feel threatened. But where my brother lives in London, there's a lot of Palestinians, and yes, I don't know if he feels threatened, but he has experience of people, hearing people shouting things like "kill the Jews." So I
mm.
don't know
There's
how.
there's yeah there's a lot, there's a very big Jewish community where I live, and but only recently, like, I know I had friends that are part of the Jewish community, and but I don't feel like it's sort of stand out. It's like there's a certain cafe that they go to, and it's, collectively they'll all sort of be together there, and it's that kind of thing, but not like a stand out. But then obviously since the recent goings on, shall we say,
Mm,
there's been a very prominent and quite in your face presence around here, and lots of uh, demonstrations, and not from the Jewish side either, which I think's a bit bit in your face around here, and quite provocative, I think.
yeah,
Notably, and I'm not Jewish, so for me to notice that, it must be quite hard for people around here as well, because it's very, very, on a Saturday morning, trying to walk my dog down at the beach, and you've got Palestinian protesters, or activists, whatever you'd like to call them, screaming and shouting down at the, on a public walkway down at the beach.
yeah. And
Whereas,
so I suppose those people will feel far more threatened and maybe still
that's what I mean.
experiencing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not nice for anyone to be walking around hearing anything like this. That, I don't think. Or is it not nice? Or is it? I don't know. It's threatening.
Yeah, it's threatening. And I don't think we need to talk too much about it, but
Mm.
the the whole argument over there in Israel, in Gaza, it, it just, sometimes I just think, well, and obviously that what you're talking about, the Palestinian,
Mm.
they're protesting because of what the Israeli government are doing, and so that's maybe a separate thing, but there is still a lot of anti-Semitism. Well, maybe we could talk about what I experienced in the Telegram
Yeah.
group. There is still anti-Semitism, and so sometimes I think to myself, well, maybe that's why we have this safe space of Israel as Jewish people, because, and maybe if people stopped with this anti-Semitism, then Jewish people wouldn't feel the need for the safe space.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't. I think I think we've diverted, but I do remember you asking about how um, the celebrations.
Mm.
What was it like going to synagogue and things like that? And I think I potentially, that was really the only times that Judaism was in my life, was because we even celebrated Christmas as a family,
Yeah.
but or not we even,
So
we've
it's
celebrated Christmas.
adaptable then. It's adaptable. You haven't got to. Was that
Yeah.
because you wanted to, or just because everyone else did, though?
It's an interesting thing because I recently read my children the book When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit. Have you heard of that book?
No.
So it's by Judith Kerr, I think her name's Judith Kerr, who wrote The Tiger Who Came to Tea.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
that book?
Yes, I do actually. Yeah, I
Okay,
remember it.
so she wrote When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, which is about her experiences as a child. So um, basically, she was the daughter of a well known journalist, and her father would write articles, anti-Hitler articles, um, and he was Jewish. But what's interesting is she talks about at the book about how she knew she was Jewish. You know, her experience of being Jewish was very similar to mine. She knew she was Jewish, but it didn't come into their lives in any way at all. But her father was
Mm.
anti-Hitler because Hitler was not a particularly nice person, and so her father would bravely write these anti-Hitler articles, and then as just before Hitler came into power, it was someone called her father and said, the first thing that's going to happen when Hitler gets into power is they're going to take away your passports. So her father very quickly that night got out of the country, and then her and her brother and her mother followed, literally like a day or two later, and it was kind of the following 3 days, I don't know, 2 3 days after they were all out of the country, that Hitler got voted in. And she
Mm.
said up until that kind of literally the those kind of couple of months before, when Hitler was really becoming quite powerful, was only when she was in primary school, first started to really realize that being Jewish was a thing. um,
Oh,
and she said, before at school that she'd play with everyone, but then some of the children started to say to her, "Oh, we can't play with you because you're a Jew," and there became like sides. There was the Nazis and I can't remember what they called them, the children who, obviously for all based on their parents' beliefs. There was the
yeah,
parents who were going to vote for Hitler and the parents who weren't. And it was the segregation started. But it's interesting because throughout the book, the book is then all about her experiences in the different countries that they lived in. But what I noticed is it's not she doesn't explain it or justify it in the book, but she doesn't talk once about celebrating a Jewish festival, but she talks about Christmas, and their tree, and the year that they didn't have enough money for a tree, and they always had a big tree because they'd lived in a very big house in Germany, and they always had this big tree, and she remembered it. And so it was all about Christmas. And so I think that it's not unusual for people who aren't practicing Jews to celebrate the traditions of the country that they live in, which are primarily Christian
yeah.
here. So it's just what we've always done, no different to anyone else. But I do remember having we'd go to my nan's, and we'd sometimes celebrate Passover at my nan's, which is one of the Jewish festivals. And um, at Passover, there's my experience of it is there's a book that you read. I won't get the name right. Haggadah. That's probably completely wrong. Um, but I've got the children's one that my nan had, and we'd read the book, and then eat the specific foods, and there's kind of a play you can do. And my nan, I remember, I've got the script of her, that she wrote us all apart. We did with my cousins, and we performed the little play. um so we do things like
So you
that.
did, yeah, you did still have a sprinkling of the Jewish celebration.
A sprinkling, I think, is the right word. And then if we went over there when it was Hanukkah, because Hanukkah is when you light the candles on the
Oh
menorah.
yeah,
So we didn't go because you light a candle a day, and it's celebrated every day for the 8 days.
yeah.
So we didn't go every day, but we would go to my grandparents once a week, and so we would be there over Hanukkah for one day at least, and we'd do a Hanukkah celebration with my
And then
grandparents.
do you pass that on now with your children? Do you
Well,
like, because I know you're saying about obviously the books that you've read. Do you try to teach them something about, is it important to you,
Yeah,
like being Jewish,
yeah.
to pass on?
The cultural aspect of it, it really is, and I do quite like some of the. Whenever I have gone to synagogue, I haven't been since I was early 20s really, but whenever I've been, I've always found that I quite like the well, you take the religion out of it because I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I like religion for the community and the mental health benefits when it brings people together and the support of each other. But in terms of
Yeah.
this kind of rigid belief in a one way, I'm not a huge fan of that really. But the thing I found about the Jewish religion is it's so much more about community and culture. There's
Mm.
obviously the teachings, and that's very important, but a lot of it is this community and culture, and I felt that very much when I've been in that environment. And I would like to pass that on to the kids, but I don't know enough. So we've been through, I guess, like you say, a sprinkling of trying
Yeah.
to celebrate and teach them things. It's interesting because Jessie Ware, do you know Jessie Ware, the singer
No.
Jessie Ware? She she has gone back, and so I think she was brought up quite similarly to me, other than um, a little bit more Jewish than I was. But she's actually gone back and done her bat mitzvah, which is
What does that mean?
well,
Because and
it's
you just like, I remember like, oh yeah, bar mitzvahs, and it was a saying for us as funerals, weddings, and bar mitzvahs, but like I don't know what that means.
I if you want to liken it to Christian religion, I guess maybe it's a little bit like a baptism or a
Right.
christening, but it happens at 13 for boys and 12.
Like a coming of age.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, well, I don't know much, but what I do know is, or the kind of uh, it's where the child takes on religious responsibilities. I guess it is like a coming of age
Mm.
type thing. And I don't really know. I think it's all got a bit big, hasn't it? I mean, in America, you see these huge parties,
Yeah.
a bit
I
like the.
remember it from films. I watched a documentary. It's not a documentary. It's a series on Netflix a little while ago, and it was a guy who's I'll remember what it's called anyway. But it has all of the celebrations on there, and they look like so much fun.
Yeah, oh yeah, there's that, like, My Big
Yeah,
Fat Jewish Wedding or
the
something, which is the
dancing.
Orthodox
Yeah,
Jews. Yeah, yeah. Um, so Jessie Ware, she has actually gone back and and because you have to study for the bat mitzvah. It's not just so it's not like, oh, well, I don't know actually what they do in the Christian religion, but I got the
is it a
impression
memory
that you
game?
just
Have you
turn up
got a?
and yeah, you have to be able to speak Hebrew and
Oh
read
God,
Hebrew. I believe it's very, very. I suppose if you're somebody who's gone to synagogue for your whole life and gone to um, Hebrew classes and all of those kind of things, it's probably not a huge undertaking because it's everything you've been brought
yeah.
up with. But I think it's a bit like going and doing a degree or something if you go and do it. If I were to go and do it now, but I can see why Jessie Ware did it because she wants to pass on in the same way that I think, like, like me, she's partnered to I actually think she's exactly like me. I think she had a Christian father and a Jewish mother and is
Mm.
now has a Jewish Christian husband, and I think wants to be able to teach her children because the traditions have gone, they get lost with the older generation. And so she's
Yeah,
gone back and done
yeah,
this. She's studied and
and
she's done the
yeah.
bat mitzvah, and I get why, so she can
And do you
learn it
think
and pass it
that's do
on.
you yeah, and do you think that's important as well? Do you think it's getting diluted now that things, because if your grandparents are really, and then it kind of went down to you, and you're still passing parts of it on. Do you think it'll ever be? Um, do you think it's important for you to keep it going within your family so that people remember?
I think it's important that they know it. It's their story, isn't it? The kids' childhood is their story. I can't. make their story my story. But I think looking back now, it was a nice thing to have that influence and to. But everybody's got different things that they learn from their older generation. You've got things that I didn't have, and other people have got things that you didn't have, and so the kids will have something. But there is something nice about that custom and them knowing. But yeah, I mean, they can get it. I wish I'd maybe gone to Israel and stayed on a kibbutz and things like that when I was younger, and my cousins, because if you are Jewish, you can get certain privileges and go to Israel and for on these free birthright trips. Not that obviously I would want to do that right now, but that would have been a great experience. You have to
Oh, I
be,
had no idea you could do that.
yeah, yeah. I'm not sure the intention behind it, but those are nice things, you know. If the place can sort itself out by the time, you know, within the next 20 years, then that would be something that would be nice for the kids to do. I think so. Yeah, I think I do. It is important to me that they, and what I'm trying to do is bring in as much. So I have this writing from my nan, and my mum's cousin is very, what has been in the past, very good at getting information from the generations above us, and she's passed a lot of information on to me. Not, it's actually not about being Jewish, but about those people's lives, which would have been more embedded in the religion.
So, is there things that you think of that that more people you wish more people understood?
Um, Not really.
No.
I don't think so. In life in general, I think it would be nice if everyone were a little bit more compassionate, because certain comments can make people feel uncomfortable. But I think that's the case for everything. I don't think it's just a religious thing.
Mm.
And I'm sure that people of color and other religions all have different kind of feelings of discomfort when they're in a predominantly white British area.
Mm. And do you think that more people, because my school, when we were growing up, we learnt about all, like I remember Passover, and I remember us doing something but I don't actually remember it being Jewish, to be fair.
Yeah.
I don't, but do you know what I mean? I do. I
Mm.
remember that because I remember them teaching that and lots of different religions, but didn't actually put it onto Jewish. To be fair, I didn't know that was a Jewish celebration.
No, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? That when you are different, when there's something different about you to other people, or you feel different, you feel like everyone, that you feel like that difference is kind of a big flashing beacon on your head. But
Mm.
the reality is, no one else is really thinking about that.
Then, so if you think, what would you go back and give your younger self advice about sort of the now, from what you know now? Is there stuff that you would go back and say to sort of your younger self?
I missed that question. Could you phrase?
If you could go back and give your younger self some advice about sort of embracing your Jewish identity.
Yeah, I think I wish I'd learned more about it. I wish I'd learned more in
Mm.
general, to be quite honest. So it's not a big surprise that I wish I'd learned more about that. Um, but I wish I'd kind of, I think embrace is the right word. I didn't ever
Yeah.
reject it, and out of myself and my brother and my mum and my dad, I think I was the one who was most interested. I can remember going to um, the synagogue with my nan, and no one else came. Not that often, but you know, I did. But I don't. I think I would have liked to have learned more. My brother is obviously much more familiar now because his in-laws are practicing. Well, they don't go to synagogue. I don't. Well, maybe they do. And I think
So
my
what does practice? So
sister-in-law.
what does practicing mean then? Have you got to be? Can you be semi-practicing? Can you just be like following a few of the scriptures as such, or is that even the right terminology?
Yeah, by practicing, I would say you recognize the religious holidays.
Mm,
You go to synagogue. Yeah, that's how I would determine
yeah,
practicing religious of any religion.
yeah,
And my sister-in-law's family do that. Some of them quite seriously, some of them less so. Um, and so my brother is more, much more involved in that.
yeah.
Whereas I'm not. I don't get that from anyone. Um,
And do you have any other like Jewish friends?
no. Well, no. And I guess that's something that, you know, growing up in an area that was very, you see, school for me, there wasn't another Jewish person. I'm not sure there was even another Jewish person in the entire senior school of, thousands of people in those schools. Um, and then, so when I went to
Mm,
university, I would never have gone and hung out with the Jewish crowd. I don't know if there was much of a Jewish crowd at my university, but what I know is that, for example, I think my sister-in-law did very much have, all of her friends are Jewish.
mm,
Um, but she grew up in a very Jewish area and may have even gone to, don't I don't know if she went to Jewish school. I don't think so. Maybe her
mm.
brother did. I'm not sure. Either way, um, and so those people, when you're used to that community being around you, then that's what you gravitate towards, I suppose. Whereas I wasn't, and I didn't. But Philippa, my best friend from being a baby through to now, she went to a school that was a lot more multicultural, and she does have Jewish friends. She's got quite a lot of Jewish friends, and so when I am with her, but what's interesting is those Jewish people, I'm not sure they recognize me as Jewish. I'm not sure I'm Jewish enough for them, or if they
Ah,
even know that I am. I think they just think of me as
do you need to
another.
announce yourself?
Sometimes I feel like I do, yeah, yeah. So um, that's quite interesting. I don't really fit in. I fit in much more with Christian people than with Jewish people.
Yeah,
As you can tell, my
interesting.
understanding of Judaism is not on point. I can tell you what it feels like
Oh,
to
it's more
be
than
a Jewish
me.
person, but I don't. One of my friends has significantly, as a Christian person, significantly much more knowledge on Judaism than I do. Um, I couldn't educate someone on how to be a Jew, but I could educate
Yeah,
someone
because
on
you
what it
are.
feels like to
You don't
feels
need to be
like
because you are.
my genetics say it.
You just are.
I'd like to think that epigenetically, that one of the biggest studies on epigenetics is taken on from people who, from the descendants of people who were in, I want to say Auschwitz, but I'm
The
wondering if it
Holocaust.
was just Holocaust survivors in general. Um, and
Yeah, I
so,
think it was. I think
there's a
it's that.
lot of
Yeah,
there's a lot of epigenetic stuff going on there, which has actually been
yeah,
studied and shown. So I'd like to think that I've got some of that kind of, my way of being is coming down from that, which isn't
yeah,
necessarily always good, but uh, yeah. So I can educate in that way,
yeah. Exactly, and carry it
or
on through.
share.
Yeah. And is there anything else that you'd like to to point out to people, or is there any other things that you
No,
think that we should know as like as
I
non-Jewish?
I think the only thing is um uh from I think people need to realize that who they're talking to. It's not like people with different colored skin. different coloured skin, people with different coloured skin to yourself. It's an
Mm.
obvious thing. People who are from maybe Asian countries like China or Japan, it's generally obviously seen. But being a Jewish person, so my mum looks quite Jewish, my sister-in-law looks quite Jewish. I didn't get that. That wasn't passed on to me, so I look like a white Christian person. And because it's not seen, I think people forget when they're talking to people that if they are criticizing or berating another religion or another community, they could be talking to somebody from that religion or that community.
Mm.
And to just think a little bit before they speak, because you wouldn't use a racist word to you know a person of color because they obviously are. It would, in my opinion, be wrong to use
Yeah.
it behind their back, but
Mm.
you don't do it to their face because you can see what they are. Yet people just assume, in my experience, that they're talking to a white British Christian when they're looking at somebody who looks like a white British Christian, but they might not be.
Mm.
And I think it would be beneficial to people to remember that any kind of talk of or any anti-Semitic talk or any talk that is against any kind of other religion or person is segregation, and segregation is not
Mm.
a good thing, as we experienced with Hitler.
Yes.
And we was, however it's done, that's still the same kind of behaviour. My
Yes.
final words.
Don't be like Hitler.
Just don't be a dick.
But yeah, no, I think that's I think that's a yeah, I think that's very interesting to understand what it's like to be Jewish, and also the that it's not just a religion. It's, because I think that's what I struggle to get my head around, is the fact that it's not just a religion. It's actually a place geographically, a place that you specifically come from, and a group of people as well. And it's with really ingrained historic beliefs as well. And yeah, I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I'd like to learn more. And I did
Mm.
contact the local
Yeah.
synagogue, but
And it's a shame that
it's
it's
quite
such
difficult.
that it's, but understandably why it's sort of closed door, I suppose. But perhaps more people would be not understanding, but maybe more in a bit able to learn a bit more if they were able to go to things like that, and it was more open door, perhaps. My
Absolutely.
suggestion to the Jewish community.
Well, but this is my point.
Because
It's not the Jewish community; it's the
yeah.
anti-Semitism. If we didn't have the
Yeah,
anti-Semitism,
yeah,
they wouldn't need that. And I
yeah,
think that's the point. If there weren't people,
yeah.
like even in that silly little
They
Telegram
didn't. Yeah,
group,
they would
there's a
then be
group of
more open door.
people I know face to face, a local
Mm.
community, really talking like a Nazi.
Mm.
Well, and these are just people who would never cause any harm, but they're still behaving in that same way. So then
Mm.
you take
That's how it
the
starts,
next
though.
level on from that,
Mm.
and then the next level on from that, and
Yeah.
that's why it needs to be closed doors. Um,
Mm.
it would be so much better if it would be open doors, and it's the same. That's my views on Israel as well. I mean, not that I agree with the Israeli government and their kind of bombardment, but I think when I read my children these books like Anne Frank's diary and when Hitler stole Peter
Mm.
Rabbit, and even Man's Search for Meaning, what I haven't read to them, but when I just read these books, I think, thank bloody goodness we've got Israel, because what if this all happened again, which it could easily, when you've got a Telegram group of local people who are really nice people being anti-Semitic.
Mm.
So yeah, I would love the Jewish community to be more open doors, but I understand why it's not.
Yeah. And there's plenty of literature out there that you can go and I suppose, educate yourself on. That's a film, actually, that Search for Pink Rabbit as well. I
Yeah,
just
there is
looked
a
that
film.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
great.
Well, thank you very much for
Thank,
sharing your thoughts.
thank you for holding the
This
space.
journey of life with friendship as our guide, together we'll grow, 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 grow. Grow together we'll grow, grow, grow.